Hello and welcome. My name is Alex Romero with Galasso Learning Solutions. On this week's Genuine Learning blog, we will be looking at the 2025 Spring AICPA Council meeting. Now, this meeting took place in Washington, D.C. from May 13th through the 15th. And here was our agenda for our time out there. We first heard from the new CEO of the AICPA, Mark Cozell, and he talked about the rise to the future. Then we had Leveraging the New Science of Certainty with Daniel Burrus. In the afternoon, we did a group activity with our tabletops looking into the future and what the profession is going to hold when we get to the year 2040. And then finally, I want to touch about the topics that we looked at and we discussed on Capitol Hill with our representatives. So our day started off with Mark coming forward. This was his first meeting as the new CEO. And one of the things that I want to highlight here is that since Mark started back in January, he has had this email address, this askmark@aicpa-cema.com. And what he really wanted people to do is kind of give some member feedback. And so he was asking, what can the AICPA do for you and your career? And so along the bottom here, I have listed some of those key elements and those key themes that he kept hearing from all the different members. So he heard that a lot of people were looking for small firm support. Then also the audit needs in local governments. I can speak to this one personally, as I have experienced where there are a lot of local governments that are maybe in rural areas that they don't have anybody that is going to audit them, or they don't have the money to pay for the firms that actually do governmental audits. So that is a very big concern right now. Then we have our legislation support, and that I think is really focusing on the different CPA pathways. Then, of course, our talent pipeline, that is something that has been at the forefront of everybody's mind for the last couple of years. We have our CPA branding, so kind of going back to the NPEG and some of the recommendations that they had and really telling that compelling story. And then also we had our building communities. So people are looking to have communities around their specific areas of focus within the profession. The next section that we talked about was the new science of certainty. And so before we did this session, they had sent out a survey to everybody that was going to be at council, and they asked these questions. What's the biggest future opportunity, and what are some initiatives you are most excited about? So the ones that he has highlighted on these slides are those that were most predominant from the members that were responding from council. And so what I find interesting here is that, of course, we're talking a lot about AI, innovation, and then when you look at some of those initiatives that people are most excited about, it kind of drills down into specific software. So DAS with the AICPA, the Dynamic Audit Solutions, using Copilot. And then most interesting, what I included here is that we did a Conference IO as a poll in the session where we were asked, what is your future view of the profession? And you can see the spread here. So it went from very optimistic all the way down to very pessimistic. Luckily, there was 0% that said very pessimistic, and we had just a few 9% that were split between that neutral and pessimistic, but the majority of people were saying that they were somewhat optimistic or very optimistic about the future of the profession. In the afternoon, we turned to our 2040 group activities. So this was led by Tom Hood, and we are looking at the finance and accounting for 2040. So the last large initiative or strategic plan was going through 2025. So now we are looking 15 years out into the future and into 2040. And so as a group, we were looking at these within our tables, and our tables were put together by random numbers. So the Leadership Academy alumni were the ones that were facilitating at each of the tables. And then we had different individuals from different states and different professions at our tables. And so we were asked to really kind of look at and discuss what are some of those hard trends that we see that are going to be coming in the future. So those things that we really can't change or have an impact on. But then also within those hard trends, what are some of our opportunities there? And then we were also looking at our soft trends, so those that we can actually have some influence on, and what those assumptions could be, and what are our opportunities to sort of influence those areas. And then we were asked to individually come up with our ideas on, in 2040, the finance and accounting profession will blank. The opportunities I see are what? And one thing that I think will help make this real is blank. So we sat there, we did some individual thinking time, and we each came up with our own ideas. And then as a table, we talked about, what do we see in 2040? The finance and accounting profession will, and then we answered some of those questions. And we took all of our information and we submitted it to a Conference.io. They collected everything. So the AICPA is going to be putting that together to kind of see what all the different tabletops address. So I will go ahead and just share, because I do actually have my written responses that I had done during this exercise. And so I was looking at hard trends about the increasing use of AI in auditing, and really looking at what we can do to make our audits more efficient, and how we are able to see those anomalies a little bit better with these tools and this advance in our technology. I said that there's going to be more remote accounting and those different positions, that we also have an increase in the amount of CPA candidates, and this would be due to having that additional CPA pathway that a lot of states are looking at. And so that one was considered a soft trend because it wasn't an absolute, and it could be influenced. And so again, I was saying that that would be increasing the talent pipeline and maybe some diversity within the profession. And then when we got to the big question here about what it will look like in 2040, our group was talking about that we were wanting it to be the profession viewed more positively in the public, that there was going to be a lot of opportunities, and that we'd be really looking at advising and making an impact, and that we would be growing, and that we'd have a lot of different professionals and a lot of different options, which we already have, but just more, and just doing different things and really moving into that more advisory role. And the thing that I said here was, the one thing I will do to make this real is that telling a compelling story. So that was one of the NPAG's recommendations, and I do believe it is something that we can all do that's super easy. A lot of people get stuck into talking about busy season and how much hours they work and how exhausted they are, and that's not going to attract anybody into the profession. So we really do need to tell that compelling story, talking about the wonderful things that we get to do as maybe council members, and going and doing these different initiatives and having these conversations at a national stage. So our Capitol Hill visits, and here are a couple of pictures. I love sharing pictures. I always try to take a lot of pictures when I'm at council. And so our first one there is actually the group from Colorado. So we have in that picture our CEO, Alicia Gelinas, and then we have Toby. He was the past chair. Alexi is our current chair, and then I am the chair-elect for Colorado. And then in that smaller picture, there's just a couple more of us from the Colorado group. So what we took up to the Capitol were three main areas. So we talked about the pass-through entity tax. And so this was looking at, right now, we had the coupling of the 199A deduction with the pass-through entity tax. And so it would mean that you wouldn't be able to take that pass-through, the PTET, if you weren't also eligible for the 199A deduction. So we were hoping to get those uncoupled so that it wasn't a one, you either qualified or you didn't, that you were still looking at them individually, which is what has been in the past what we've been doing. And then one that really speaks to me, and one that I have been really excited about, was our accounting, putting that underneath the technology arm in STEM. And this would make it so that there would be funding for schools K through 12 to have accounting courses. So some of those schools that might not have anything in accounting, they would now be able to get funding so that they would introduce people to accounting. A lot of people that are maybe in these economic diverse situations, or they are in the inner city schools, they don't have the opportunity to really know who an accountant is or who a CPA is. And so by having them get educated and introduced to accounting in high school might lead them to have a very successful career within the accounting and CPA profession. And our last area was the 529 plan expansion and really looking at workforce development so that you could use some of those funds for your certifications. So when we were talking to the legislators that were from Colorado, they really keyed into the workforce development aspect of it. So yes, this would include that you could use this for CPA exam preparation, but it also would include some of the other tests if you were a nurse or you were doing anything else that might require additional certification. And lastly, I always point this out when I do our recaps of council that the best part is always the people. So I've shared 3 pictures here with everybody. The first one is the very large group of AICPA Leadership Academy alumni that were attending the council meeting here in Washington, D.C. And then on the bottom there is myself and Bridget Kegler. She is the current chair for the Louisiana Society of CPAs, and she's doing amazing work. Talk about somebody telling a compelling story. She has a bunch of shirts that talks about CPAs and is really putting a lot of energy into it and really trying to attract people into the profession. So she's doing an awesome job. And then the last picture there is with Lisa Simpson. She's the VP at the AICPA for Firm Services. And then we have Catherine Horton, and she also is a sole proprietor, and she does some of her own audit work. And that was interesting, just getting to hear a little bit more about what she does on a day in and day out basis. So wonderful connections. Always the best part of council is getting to come together and catch up and see what everybody's doing and just kind of share our love for the profession. So I do want to thank you for joining me today as we looked at what happened at the 2025 Spring Council meeting for the AICPA in Washington, D.C. Thank you.